There's a moment just before dawn in the desert when the world seems to hold its breath. The air is cold enough to sting your fingers, the sand is still, and the horizon glows with a thin, golden line that feels almost too delicate to belong to such a harsh place. And if you stand there long enough listening, you start to realize that the desert is nothing like the empty, lifeless wasteland many imagine. In fact, it's one of the most alive, most ancient, and most surprising environments on Earth. But the desert doesn't reveal itself all at once. It doesn't shout, and it rarely rushes. It speaks in quiet details, in the whisper of wind across dunes, in the sudden flutter of a tiny bird navigating an impossible landscape, in the shifting shadows that stretch and shrink with the rising sun. And if you take your time, if you slow down just enough to let the desert set the pace, you begin to notice things that aren't obvious at first glance. You begin to understand that this place, so often described as barren, is actually one of the most perfectly balanced ecosystems on our planet. Every grain of sand, every plant, every creature plays a role in a survival story that's been unfolding for millions of years. A story of resilience, adaptation, and quiet strength. As the sun climbs higher, the temperature begins to rise. A heat you can't quite describe takes shape, a thick, dry wave that rolls across the landscape, making the air shimmer. For people who encounter this kind of heat for the first time, the instinct is to step back, to retreat. But life here has learned to lean into it. Plants twist their leaves to protect their moisture. Animals burrow deep beneath the surface. Some creatures are so adapted to scarcity that they can survive months without drinking a single drop of liquid water. The desert teaches a different way of living, one where every choice is intentional, every move is calculated, and nothing is wasted. Most deserts on Earth, from the vast Sahara to the painted dunes of the American Southwest, have been shaped not just by heat but by time. Wind sculpting the land for thousands of years. Ancient rivers carving pathways that have long since dried. Seas that once covered entire continents, leaving behind salt flats that sparkle under the sun like frost made of diamonds. And beneath these shifting sands lies a history older than humanity, older than many of the world's mountains. Fossils of long-extinct animals sleep under the dunes. Remnants of forgotten civilizations hide in eroded cliffs. Meteorites, untouched for ages, sit half-buried in the sand, preserved by the desert's dry embrace. When you walk through the desert, you're not just moving across land, you're walking through time. There's something else the desert does that few places can. It forces you to confront silence. Not the soft, comfortable quiet of a forest or the rhythmic hush of ocean waves, but a deep, absolute silence that feels almost alive. Many people describe the first encounter with desert silence as unsettling, as if the world has suddenly stopped. But stay long enough, and that silence becomes a companion. A reminder that in a world filled with noise, there are still places where you can hear your own thoughts clearly. And it's in that silence that you begin to sense the life hidden in the edges of the landscape. A lizard darting between rocks, a beetle tracing lines in the sand, the distant call of a bird searching for food in the morning light, each of them surviving in a place where survival seems nearly impossible. The desert is a paradox, hostile yet nurturing, empty yet overflowing with life, quiet yet powerful. It has shaped cultures, inspired myths, challenged explorers, and protected secrets no one has uncovered yet. And as the morning light spills across the landscape, illuminating dunes like ocean waves frozen in time, the desert begins its slow transformation into the kind of hot, shimmering world people think of when they hear the word desert. But that transformation, like everything else here, is gradual. The desert doesn't rush. It has all the time in the world. And as we step deeper into this vast expanse, following the light as it climbs into the sky, the true story of the desert begins to unfold. A story far richer, far stranger, and far more beautiful than most people ever imagine. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, the desert begins to reveal another of its strange contradictions, that it is both a world of emptiness and a world of astonishing resilience. To someone crossing it for the first time, it may feel lifeless, a place where nothing can possibly survive the kind of heat that presses down like an invisible weight. But look closely, pause long enough, and the desert starts to show you its quiet, surprising pulse. Life here doesn't shout, it whispers. At midday, when the air itself seems to shimmer with heat, the desert's inhabitants are hidden beneath the sand, beneath rocks, inside tiny burrows. It's a world operating with an entirely different rhythm, a rhythm of preservation. Every movement is calculated. Every choice is a negotiation with heat and hunger. A single lizard might spend most of the day waiting under a stone that barely casts a shadow, conserving every drop of moisture in its body, knowing that spending too much energy could mean not making it to the next sunrise. It's easy to forget, surrounded by silence, that deserts are some of the most ancient landscapes on Earth. Their dunes have shifted, swallowed, and uncovered stories older than human memory. The Sahara, for instance, wasn't always a vast golden sea. Fossils unearthed beneath its sand reveal the bones of whales, ancient river systems, and forests that once flourished where only dunes now remain. It's humbling to imagine that the place we think of as the driest and harshest was once lush. A reminder that deserts are not static wastelands, but evolving chapters in Earth's long history. As the afternoon stretches on, the sunlight sharpens to a brilliant white, and the temperature reaches its peak. The air becomes so hot that the horizon wavers, blending sky and sand into one liquid, trembling line. Travelers often speak of seeing distant shapes that vanish as quickly as they appear, mirages that give the illusion of lakes or distant cities glimmering in the heat. These shimmering visions are nothing more than light bending through layers of hot and cooler air. But to a weary wanderer hundreds of years ago, they must have seemed like cruel illusions crafted by the desert itself. Yet despite the harshness, humans have always found ways to survive here. Nomadic tribes learned patterns of wind, stars, and seasons that outsiders would never detect. They knew how to find water by observing the flight of birds, how to read the desert's shifting face the way a sailor reads the sea. Their survival wasn't built on conquering the desert, but on understanding it, listening to it. Even today, those traditions live on in communities whose ways of life are intertwined with dunes and silence. People who know that a desert can teach patience like no other place on Earth. Far below the blazing surface, things happen too slowly for human senses to notice. Some desert plants send roots so deep they can reach ancient groundwater left behind from wetter ages. Their seeds can lie dormant for years, even decades, waiting for the perfect moment, a brief rainfall, maybe only a few millimeters deep, to burst back into life. In the Atacama Desert, one of the driest places known, flowers can suddenly bloom across entire valleys, turning endless beige into oceans of purple, pink, and gold. It seems almost miraculous, but it's simply the desert showing another of its many faces, revealing that beneath the stillness, an entire world waits patiently for its cue. As the heat finally begins to soften, the desert shifts again. Shadows stretch long and thin across the sand. The surface cools just enough for the first stirrings of life to begin. A beetle climbs a dune, its body angled to collect droplets of moisture from the drifting air. A fox leaves its den, careful, silent, moving with the precision of something that has learned survival over countless generations. And if you sit still long enough, you begin to see this hidden world come alive. A world that moves lightly, delicately, with an awareness that every step matters. There's also a kind of strange beauty in watching how the landscape interacts with the wind. Grains of sand, no larger than tiny crystals, are lifted and swept into waves that rise and collapse like slow-motion oceans. Each dune is sculpted by invisible hands, shaped into flowing curves that seem almost too perfect to be real. And yet, the moment you think you understand its shape, it's already changing. Some dunes migrate several feet each year, swallowing plants, bones, abandoned structures, and sometimes entire memories beneath their drifting slopes. The desert, for all its emptiness, is a place of motion. The sky at this hour turns from pale blue to a richer, deeper shade. The sun, still intense but slowly descending, casts a golden glow that makes the dunes look like molten metal. It's the time of day when the desert feels almost like another planet, silent and endless, stretching toward horizons that seem too far to reach. You can feel the earth radiate the heat it absorbed during the day, the ground warm beneath your feet as though storing sunlight for later. And then, as daylight begins to fade, something remarkable happens. The temperature drops with astonishing speed. This is one of the desert's most defining characteristics. What was scorching hot hours ago becomes cool, even cold, as the heat escapes into the open sky. Without humidity, without cloud cover, without anything to trap warmth close to the surface, the desert becomes a place of crisp air and long shadows. It's as if the land itself exhales after a long, breathless day. The transition from searing day to cool evening is more than just a shift in temperature. It's a shift in personality. The silence deepens, the wind softens, and life that has been hiding begins to step forward confidently, knowing its time has come. The desert becomes a theater where nocturnal creatures play out ancient dramas, the hunt, the chase, the delicate balance between predator and prey. As twilight settles over the dunes, a sense of vastness fills the air, a feeling unique to deserts. You begin to understand why travelers through history spoke of deserts not just as places, but as experiences, landscapes that strip away noise, distraction, even the illusion of control. In the desert, you are reminded of scale, of humility, of the quiet strength required simply to exist here. And as the first stars begin to appear, the desert prepares to reveal a spectacle unlike any other on Earth. If you spend enough time in the desert, something unexpected begins to happen. At first, the landscape feels empty, stripped bare, almost hostile. But the longer you travel across its endless expanse, the more you begin to notice the subtle patterns that shape its rhythms. The quiet breath of wind over dunes, the faint shimmer of heat rising from stone, the delicate marks of life that survives where survival seems impossible. Life in the desert reveals itself slowly, almost cautiously, as if testing whether you are patient enough to see it. In the early morning, when the first light spills across the sand, the desert seems almost gentle. The dunes glow softly, every ridge casting a shadow that feels like a painter's brushstroke. This is the hour when the smallest creatures awaken. Tiny lizards emerge from shallow burrows, leaving winding trails behind them. Beetles climb up slopes of sand to collect dew on their shells, rolling droplets into precious reserves of water. These are beings built for scarcity, each movement efficient, every decision shaped by millennia of adaptation. And yet, they move with a kind of confidence, as though they know the desert better than anyone ever could. As the sun climbs higher, the transformation is dramatic. Heat becomes a force of its own, not just temperature but pressure, a constant, overwhelming presence that pushes down from above and radiates upward from the earth. In the heart of the afternoon, the desert becomes a world of extremes. Rocks heat to temperatures that could sear skin. Air shimmers with mirage, bending light into illusions of water that vanish the moment you approach. Even the wind grows sharp, carrying grains of sand with the sting of tiny needles. And yet, even here, where the environment appears most unforgiving, life continues its quiet work. You might see a distant shadow moving across the horizon, the outline of a camel, an animal so profoundly adapted to this world that it seems more desert than flesh. Or perhaps the thin silhouette of an acacia tree, standing alone with roots stretching deep beneath the sand, tapping into hidden moisture that would be unreachable for anything less tenacious. These are reminders that the desert is not dead. It is selective. It allows only the most resilient to remain. Travelers throughout history have spoken of the desert as a teacher, and somewhere in the stillness that starts to make sense. The desert doesn't offer comfort or distraction, it offers clarity. There is something about the vastness, the silence, the absence of everything unnecessary that reveals truths we often miss in the noise of ordinary life. You begin to notice your own thoughts more sharply, your own intentions more clearly. The desert is a mirror, but it reflects only what you are willing to face. In the late afternoon, as the sun finally begins to soften, colors shift once again. Shadows stretch long across the dunes, turning gold into bronze and bronze into deep, cool red. The temperature drops quickly, as though the heat was never real, only borrowed. Animals emerge cautiously from hiding. Birds that spent the day resting under rocks or nestled between branches begin to fetch food. If you look closely, you might see paw prints from a fox or the faint track of a snake weaving patterns across untouched sand. The desert, for a moment, feels alive again, briefly vibrant, almost celebratory. And then comes night. Desert nights are legendary, not only for their cold but for their beauty. Without moisture in the air or city lights on the horizon, the sky becomes vast and sharp. Stars appear in numbers that seem impossible, each one a point of light unfiltered and clear. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like a luminous river. The silence of the desert deepens, becoming almost musical in its stillness. People who have camped in deserts often say the same thing, that the night sky feels closer, almost pressing down toward the earth as if inviting you to reach up and touch it. It is in these hours that the desert reveals its most surprising truth. Beneath the harshness, beneath the extremes, beneath the endless stretches of emptiness, the desert is a place of balance. Heat and cold, scarcity and abundance, danger and serenity. Every living thing, every insect, every plant, every animal moves within this balance, learning not to conquer the desert but to coexist with it. And for travelers who cross its vastness, the lesson becomes clear. Sometimes the most powerful landscapes are the ones that ask the most from us and give the least at first glance. As the night deepens and a gentle, cold wind sweeps across the sand, you realize that the desert's greatest secret is not its heat, nor its silence, nor its emptiness. Its secret is perspective. It strips life down to its essentials, showing you what truly matters and what never did. And in that stripped-down clarity, the world seems suddenly bigger, older, more mysterious. And you, standing under a sky full of ancient stars, feel both impossibly small and deeply connected to everything around you. As the desert night begins to pull its deep blue mantle over the land, something profound settles into the air. A realization that the desert, in all its apparent emptiness, holds more life, more history, and more quiet truth than almost any other place on Earth. This is where the world slows down enough for us to finally listen. And now, as we move toward the end of our journey, the desert opens one last chapter, a chapter not about survival, or extremes, or the patterns of wind and stone, but about meaning. Because in the end, deserts force us to confront something we rarely face in our daily lives: simplicity. The overwhelming, humbling kind of simplicity that reduces life to essentials: water, shelter, warmth, direction. Standing in a desert stripped of distractions, surrounded by the honest silence of a landscape that has existed long before us and will remain long after us, you begin to understand things that no city, no forest, no ocean can quite teach in the same way. You begin to see how fragile human existence is, how dependent we are on balance, how small we are compared to the forces shaping this planet. But at the same time, paradoxically, you also feel something empowering, because the desert doesn't just confront you with your smallness, it shows you your resilience. The same resilience that allows a seed to lie dormant for decades, waiting for a single rainfall. The same resilience that allows animals to evolve astonishing abilities in order to endure impossible heat and darkness. The same resilience that shapes people who call the desert home, guiding them through generations with knowledge passed quietly, respectfully, and carefully from one to the next. And somewhere in that balance between fragility and strength lies the true spirit of the desert, a place that seems empty but is full of secrets, silent but never truly still, harsh but deeply generous to those who understand its rhythm. As the stars rise clearer, sharper, closer than they appear anywhere else, The desert reveals its final lesson, that the world is not just noise and motion, that beneath the rush of modern life, there is a slower heartbeat, an older wisdom, the kind that can only be heard when the distractions fade, when the horizon stretches wider than your ambitions, and when the universe finally has room to speak. You look up and the sky feels impossibly large. You look around and the land feels timeless. And for a moment, a rare, grounding moment, you feel connected not just to the earth, but to the entire arc of history, to every traveler who has walked this same sand, to every ancient civilization that learned to read the stars, to every creature that evolved here against all odds, to every grain of sand that was once a mountain, before time sculpted it into something soft enough to slip between your fingers. And this is where our journey ends, not with answers, but with perspective. Because deserts remind us that the planet is far older and far wiser than we often remember. They remind us that beauty isn't always lush or colorful. Sometimes it's the beauty of endurance, of patience, of things shaped by thousands of years of quiet persistence. As the night deepens, the air cools, and the dunes begin to glow under the moonlight, you realize that the desert is not a place you simply visit. It's a place you carry with you afterward, in the way you walk, in the way you breathe, in the way you appreciate the rare and precious things in your own life. And as we step away from this vast, ancient world of sand and silence, the desert offers one last whisper, a soft reminder that even in the harshest, hottest, driest places, life finds a way, and so can you. This is the end of our journey across the desert, but the beginning of a new way of seeing the world.